Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Rocking around the Christmas tree at the Christmas party hop.
You know she was 13 when she recorded that song?
I didn't know that.
There's Brenda Lee and the Christmas tree here on the Law Show on CL 650. Just less than 2 weeks ahead of Christmas. Joe Murphy and Bill Dick from MurphyBattista, personal injury lawyers here in Vancouver, back with us on the program again today. And, you know, we're trying to do everything we can to help people through the party season in order that they can relax and enjoy themselves, and also at the same time be aware of the legalities surrounding the party system, whether you're a business person who wants to throw a little get-together for the staff, or perhaps you're the person who's organizing the annual drink-a-thon on the street that occurs every Christmas season. Whatever the circumstances may be, there are liabilities. There are legal responsibilities that go along with people who throw these parties. We'll get to the commercial end of the conversation, and bartenders and hotel people who take money for alcohol. That's a whole other category. But so far our conversation has been, we've been talking about either the staff party, the business context, or the personal, the homeowner party. And we learned in our last segment, courtesy of Joe and Bill, that the Supreme Court of Canada has so far at least decided that the host of a private party is not responsible for what his or her guests do after the party. Although, Bill, they did leave a little bit of room for some kind of interpretation at the end of that decision, which might suggest what to you, the lawyer?
So as a lawyer, the Supreme Court of Canada did very specifically leave the door open in cases where the host is encouraging the drinking, is actually doing something positive and increases the risk essentially to the public that would establish that there is that connection and there is a duty of care owed. And the Supreme Court of Canada said in those circumstances, we don't have to decide it, but they're not going to preclude that possibility of a lawsuit being successful in those circumstances. Like Joe said, when there's drinking games and there's encouragement of drinking. And
let's do some shots,
do some shots.
Oh, brother.
And the host knows that the person is intoxicated and knows that they're driving.
Right.
And in the States, in those circumstances, they've certainly found liability against the host.
And I guess that's why so many of us are surprised by this, Bill, because we watch too much American TV.
Yeah,
and we have seen hosts of private parties get nailed and be responsible and be held responsible in those circumstances. And Joe, you were indicating during the break that, you know, because the Supreme Court has kind of left this door open, and you and Bill would really like to have a crack at that vacant space with the open door, one thing that every homeowner or party host should do before throwing open the doors and breaking out the bottle opener is having a look at their homeowner's insurance. Why?
Well, Sterling, my car has $5 million in third-party liability coverage on it. So if there's an accident caused by me driving or someone else, I've got that coverage and protection.
Okay.
With my homeowner policy, I also have the maximum $5 million because, again, if something happens in my house or related to me personally outside driving, I want that protection to be available for me. So one can say, avoid having people over, avoid having drinks, but that's not the way our world works.
That's for sure.
So if you can't avoid the risks, then protect yourself by having lots of insurance. It costs very little each year to have $5 million in coverage rather than $1 million.
And what do you ask for when you sit down with your insurance agent and you're reviewing your coverage? You go, is it a liability clause, Joe?
I ask for the maximum liability coverage.
Okay. And typically, what would your basic tenants or homeowners policy include as a matter of course for liability coverage?
I would say it's $500,000 to $1 million is the basic coverage, which is higher than anywhere in the States. For some reason in the States where the awards can be much, much higher,
yes,
their coverages are much, much lower. And I don't know why that happens. I think that's one of the benefits we in BC have from ICBC coming in, because with ICBC having come in, over time people have become more and more aware of the benefit and wisdom in having lots of liability coverage.
Right. And
the typical homeowner's policy has $1 million usually, or $500,000 to $1 million.
And that's homeowners and renters as well, right?
Yeah.
Tenants policy, same thing.
Third-party liability.
Right.
The problem is that there are a lot of cases that exceed $1 million. So
yes.
you're putting your assets at risk if you don't have.
Well, you talked about that
coverage.
unfortunate girl who was killed by the guy from the party, or wasn't killed, but was rendered a quadriplegic in Ontario. Now that young woman is going to require a lifetime of care costs, and that easily could go past $1 million.
Easily, and there are decisions coming out of Ontario. I think I just read one where it was $20 million. That's the highest in Canada.
Okay.
But yeah, when someone's rendered a paraplegic or a quadriplegic, you're looking at millions of dollars in damages.
The care alone is millions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned, and this is one contingency I'd like to come back to. You talked about a party, and I think it was the test case for the Supreme Court, Bill, that you were talking about. The party was a BYOB party. So the host, in that instance, is not completely responsible for how inebriated the guests get because they brought their own hooch.
Right.
So does that actually relieve the host of some responsibility?
It does, in the sense that the host is not going to be expected to be able to monitor how much your guest drinks when they bring their own, as opposed to you're handing out the alcohol and you know how much they've had to drink.
Right.
And in that case, you know how much they've had to drink. It's more foreseeable that that person is going to get into an accident because you know their level of intoxication. BYOBs, you don't know that. And the Supreme Court of Canada said, unlike a bar, there's no obligation in that circumstance and you can't expect a homeowner to be monitoring in detail how much their guests are drinking.
And I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, you invite people over to your house. You're not the booze police. You're the host, for crying out loud, and it's generally a pretty busy job.
Yeah, unlike a bar, we're not yet at the stage where we're our brother's keepers.
Right. Well, let's talk about bars, gentlemen. Let's talk about the responsibilities and liabilities associated with people who provide drinks for money. Bars, hotels, taverns, all like restaurants, all of that kind of stuff. This changes the landscape immediately, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because the bar makes more money by selling more drinks to this individual.
Yep.
They're encouraged to make more money. They're encouraged. I don't know if there's ever been a study, but I'm sure a drunk tips better than someone who's sober.
You know, I'll bet you that's a pretty safe bet, too.
So there's a real incentive, and
Yeah.
even though in BC we have this serve right policy, which says to the server in a bar, you've got to monitor and you can't continue serving when someone's obviously being affected. The business reality is they serve them more and more and more.
Especially as the tips get sweeter and sweeter.
And they run a tab usually, so they know exactly how many drinks these people had. I had a case, Sterling, a few years ago of a fellow who was badly injured following a party in a bar. And the bar had just brought in an electronic system, and they recorded 1,580 drinks having been consumed by a party of 80 people.
Good grief.
And some of those 80 didn't have a lot to drink. So if you do the math, it's shocking. Plus, there was a lot of shooters being consumed, and this fellow had a terrible brain injury that arose not out of his intoxication, but out of the intoxication of two other fellows.
What happened? How did he sustain the injury, Joe?
These two other fellows, who were both huge, very drunk men, were about to have a fight, and he had the misfortune of being between them.
Oh.
So he got sucker punched and fell, smashed his head on the cement, and his life was never the same.
And now, in terms
the bar was liable.
I was just going to say. Now, did you act for this person?
Yes.
So, was it the bar itself, or do you sue the bar, Joe, or do you sue the waiter or waitress or the bartender? How does that work?
The bar insurance covers the bar and all the staff.
Okay.
So you could name the servers, but in this case, there was revolving servers. It was effective enough to serve the bar and their own business records, 1,500 plus drinks.
No kidding, for 80 people.
And that didn't include all the shooters, and it was just, the numbers were shocking. The 9/11 call that went in when my client was so badly hurt was from one of the little girls who worked at the reception, and The recording showed her saying in this sweet little voice, we need help, someone's been badly hurt, and there's all these drunk men here.
Mm-hmm.
So it was obvious to her that the majority of this crowd was terribly intoxicated, and the bar did it simply to make money.
Absolutely. How injured did the gentleman end up being, Joe?
Very, very badly.
And to the point where that was it for his working career?
His life was changed forever.
Wow. So do you mind, am I asking what the award was?
I can't really say, but it was in the millions of dollars.
Wow. Okay. And again, of course, all bars and taverns and restaurants, Bill, are required by law to carry precisely the sort of insurance that MurphyBattista sued against, correct?
That is correct. And getting back just briefly to the employer-employee type situation, a lot of employers have their Christmas parties at restaurants or bars.
Absolutely, sure.
And the bar and the restaurant also have that responsibility to make sure that your staff don't get overserved and leave, and they'll have insurance behind that as well. So one of the recommendations for employers is have your Christmas party out at an establishment,
because
as opposed to your own establishment where you're in-house staff and in a house party.
And our staff party is at a private residence, and same one every year, but still, so the homeowner there would be somewhat responsible. Her insurance policy, would that be at play there, Joe, on a private party scenario?
Could be.
Okay.
Could be.
And in that scenario, if it was me as a private homeowner having a party for my staff, I would actually go out and get a separate insurance rider for that.
And I'll bet you that legal detail has been attended to year after year quite diligently.
I think if I hosted our office party at my home, and it's not big enough for the 80 people, our commercial liability policy for the firm would probably extend and cover that.
Interesting.
But I also have a homeowner policy with the maximum coverage, so it's available. But the bottom line is no one wants to see anything bad happen to anyone. The worst thing I want to see someone having is a bad hangover the next morning.
That's right.
But, bad things can happen, and when you start serving people alcohol, the risk of something bad happening goes way up, and you just have to be careful about that, and at the same time, protect yourself by buying liability insurance.
And what's interesting in terms of what Joe just said, that case that I was telling you about with the Vancouver law firm, so that they had a party, and then people went to a bar afterwards, and this is where the
after gathering,
the dancing of lawyers.
Okay, we do that. Our staff does that too. After they take the bus back to the hotel and are deposited in the lobby or poured into the lobby, some of them just haven't quite had enough punishment, and they go off to some club. They do it every year,
and so
this is why I don't tag along with that crowd.
So after the liability trial, then the insurance trial happened, and the insurance company denied that they had an obligation to defend or indemnify the law firm.
After party
for the law firm, because there wasn't enough connection between what happened at the bar and what happened in terms of the party. And they ultimately found that there was no insurance available for the law firm.
But that's a great idea. A good suggestion of yours, though, Bill, in terms of business people, especially the smaller business that has a manageable staff size for going somewhere for a little staff outing, to go to a commercial establishment that already has that insurance infrastructure completely in place.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of companies do that consciously.
Well, you've talked about the changing nature of the Christmas party since you've become a lawyer, and I don't think it's going to be any different in the years ahead. I think it's going to continue to evolve.
I think it will.
Need to take a quick break here. Our guests, Joe Murphy, QC, and Bill Dick from MurphyBattista, personal injury lawyers at 650 West Georgia Street in Vancouver and on Lawrence Avenue in Kelowna. Back after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.